Laura Daniels Midterm Oral Exam. First question: how have recent historical events affected the course of research in organizational psychology? Give an example of an event and the resulting outcome. This is interesting. I really remember it like it was yesterday. I decided to go ahead and keep my daughter home from school for this, really momentous occasion. It was January 20th, 2009, and Barack Obama became the very first African American president of the United States. My daughter was 12, and I wanted her to be proud of that moment and to know that there was nothing that could actually stop her from being anything or anyone that she wanted to be. It actually taught me as well that I could do and become anything that I wanted to be. It was nice to see someone who looked like me, in the Oval Office. It really just showed that anyone, regardless of their race, could actually have a high level position, whether for the government or within an organization, even like the one that I work for. Although we're really not where we should be when it comes to race relations, it does prove that in 2019 that people are more cognizant of diversity and inclusion. I mean, when you think of social media, people are offended so easily just from the slightest thing. People want to be valued and they want to be respected, whether it's just in society or within the work environment. Organizations, they are, or have been, I should say, implementing diversity and inclusion policies to really ensure that everyone is valued and that they are respected. Some companies, even like the one that I work for, have diversity and inclusion lunch and learns, panels where people come. And talk about the struggles that they went through, not only in their own personal life, but also just in the work environment as well. Women, it's interesting when you hear women talk about their struggles and their climb to the top and the things that they go through as well. I know the company that I work for, they implemented several years ago what are called employee resource groups, or ERGs. And this really allows people to go learn about a different culture. I was a part of an ERG called WNet, and it was a women's networking group. And we invited men, and it was kind of interesting. Men felt very uncomfortable coming just because there were so many women. You would think that they would jump on the opportunity, but they really did feel uncomfortable. And we really try to communicate to them that, if you want to learn about women and if you want to learn about their struggles, you want to learn about how they feel about certain situations, then come on and come to our group and come to some of our activities just so you can participate and you can learn something. And in the meantime, you learn something about yourself as well. I know with cultural diversity comes the impact of cultural differences. And I really believe that as we move forward, organizational psychologists will be asked to kind of research on these cultural differences that will arise from the socialization, communication, and employee motivation. Describe the socialization process for graduate students in your program. Is the program successful in socializing newcomers and creating job embeddedness? I have to tell you, I really enjoyed this question. Um, my daughter is the one who actually convinced me to go back to school. And so when I finally said, okay, I'm going to go ahead and do it, the first thing I needed to do was to figure out where I wanted to go ahead and get my master's. And my daughter just happened to be decided upon going to Liberty. And I said, you know what? Okay, I'm going to do this. Returning to school after so many years is definitely not an easy task. But the process wasn't so scary as I thought it was going to be. I was kind of surprised, and maybe just my ignorance at just the amount of advertising that a lot of schools put out there, like on TV with all the different colleges and different things. They're just trying to get your business. They want you to come to their schools. They want you to graduate from there and have their degrees. I was just amazed at seeing all the different ads through social media, via the internet, and just word of mouth. I know for Liberty, from the company that I work for, there were a couple of employees that actually go to Liberty University. Who would think that I'm in Texas and Liberty's in, Virginia? So that was really kind of interesting to even see that someone even heard of Liberty, because before this, I'd never had before. I know the socialization process for graduate students in my field of study, industrial and organizational psychology, to me, it seemed to be a relatively easy process. I remember submitting my application and all the applicable documents. I waited for acceptance, and then all of a sudden, then they were saying, "Okay, you need to confirm your attendance, and you need to go ahead and pay." And there we go, and start selecting your classes. It was a very easy process. I will say, when it comes to the question about my graduate program being successful in socializing newcomers, I really can only speak to my own personal experience. Um, for me, I believe for myself, it was an easy transition simply because of the type of individual that I am. I'm a person who will just go right on out there and do what I have to do, even without direction. I found that a lot of jobs that I've received, that I've had to just jump right on in without training. I had to learn on my own. And I felt that the process was pretty similar as well in this graduate program. I know, unfortunately, when I had questions regarding the graduate program, when I would have to call the number and ask these particular questions, unfortunately, I seemed to run across a lot of representatives that really didn't have answers for me, really couldn't guide me, or they just spoke of what they thought without maybe seeking some assistance or their own resources. And that was alarming in the beginning, but then I realized, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and do what I know to do. And I think that in order to make the graduate program a little bit more successful, I think it's important that the representatives that you have speaking on behalf of the university, it's important to ensure that they know what their resources are, that they understand that if they're not sure, it's okay to say, "I don't know, let me find out for you," instead of maybe thinking of their own answer, making up an answer, or making the newcomer feel like they're not important, valued, or respected. But I do believe that my graduate program does, when it comes to socializing newcomers, it does create job embeddedness. I think the program offers interesting and informative courses, and the program definitely employs professors, who are an expertise at their craft in teaching various courses. I've had great success with all of my professors since I started back in March, and I've learned something from each and every one of them, whether it was even constructive feedback. I've always learned that feedback is a gift. So it's just making me a better person, a better student. So when I do graduate, that I have something that I can take along with me. So I'm excited about that. Um, but in relation to the question, when reviewing the six dimensions of organizational socialization, I truly found it difficult to compare academia to an organization. So let me kind of explain. So, for example, when it comes to history, a new graduate student would need to do their own research, just like I was explaining earlier, of the university and their particular graduate program. This information is not automatically provided, but the nice thing is that the information can be found on the university's website. The second dimension, um, when we talk about language, a new graduate student would need to learn through their classes and conversing with their professors how to write and communicate academically through discussion posts, through their papers, through projects. That was a learning curve for me. I was so used to writing and speaking from a work environment. So when I started school, it was a shock when I got my paper back for the first time. And it was like, okay, you need to say this, you need to do it this way, phrase it this way. It was a shocker, but thank God moving forward that I've improved. So there is that language piece that students really need to learn as well. The third dimension, when we talk about politics, for new graduate students, this really would pertain to how to complete their homework assignments and understanding the student expectations and just really how the university it operates. The fourth dimension discusses people, and when we're talking about a new graduate students, they really have the opportunity to become affiliated with a group similar to their own interest, or just having the same graduate program. When I used to live on campus, or even when my daughter used to live on campus in Oklahoma when she went to Oral Roberts University, she did say she found it easier to make friendships, build those relationships with fellow students when you live on campus because you see them every day. You have roommates, you're eating, you're going to class, you're going to different functions with them. So that really makes it easier versus like an online graduate student has a more difficult time really just building those relationships. But however, there, thank God for online groups and things of that nature. And thank God for video just like this, where people can actually talk to others and see others and still feel included. The fifth dimension is the organizational goals and values. A new graduate student would need to learn the university's values and really assimilate them as their own, at least to some degree. And in regards to Liberty University, for example, just reviewing the course guide under the Honor Code is a brief intro into the goals and values, excuse me, of the university. And it really just kind of lays a foundation as to this is what this school stands for, and this is what we're expecting from you to follow. And if you're not able to do that, then possibly you might want to consider some other options. Performance proficiency, the last dimension. For any student, this pertains to performing well in each of their classes. Basically reading the applicable text, studying, putting in that time, and not waiting down to the last moment, not being that procrastinator to complete their homework assignments on time within the course. So, the next question: how can an organization reduce or prevent work family conflict? I truly believe that organizations have finally realized how they can play a significant role in either reducing or preventing work family conflict. Unfortunately, I had personally had a work family conflict a couple of years ago when my father had a stroke, and unfortunately, he was diagnosed with ALS. I found myself in a position where I had to take care of my father, and I really was a little apprehensive of going to my boss to say, "Hey, I'm going to need a little time off or a little time away to help my dad because there's no one else." And he was really going to need 24-hour care. Not only that, I had to take care of my stepmom who had fibromyalgia. So it was a really tough situation that I was confronted with. Here's the thing. Because I am a team manager, I had some flexibility, and they allowed me to work from my dad and stepmom's home. And I did have paid time off, but I didn't have enough to be there every day, all day, just to take care of my father. Fortunately, I had the full support of my manager, and I did not have to use all of my paid time off. They allowed me to work from my dad's home, and it took a lot of stress off of me, and I was able to focus on my dad's health until he went home to be with the Lord 2 years ago on Thanksgiving, 2017. But it makes me want to be a better manager after having to go through that and providing my own employees with that same support as much as I'm able to do so, depending upon their position and just trying to be flexible because that same grace was given to me. So I think it's important for supervisors to give their employees support. It does reduce stress. Does it take it away? No, but it definitely does reduce it. I know at my job, they've just implemented a new benefits package where employees are now afforded 40 hours, um, up to 40 hours within a year, whether it's for their personal health or to take care of a family member, so they don't have to use their own personal time. They've also just implemented some flexible time as well, where people can flex time just to be able to take care of those necessary things that they need to. I think it's important to also provide alternative work schedules, working 4 by 10s, possibly working part time if an organization allows that. And like I said, most importantly, having that supervisor support, it really aids in alleviating a lot of the work family conflict. And so, because I've had my own personal situation that now I am able to relate to my employees and provide whatever support that I can for them during their time of need. Next question. Imagine you have been asked to develop a performance assessment program for employee development. What techniques could you use to adequately evaluate employee performance as comprehensively as possible? Think of Murphy's List. So when I thought about this, I just kind of broke it down and I related each of the items that were on Murphy's list to where I currently work and what we do at my job. So the first one being task oriented behaviors, which really relates to specific job related tasks associated to an individual's role. I know at my job, I'm a team manager in the claims department, and we assess our adjusters by measuring their adherence, their wrap time, handle time, and task productivity rate when handling specific tasks within a claim. And there are set targets that each employee must adhere to so that they can achieve those targets. It's interesting, although that these measurements are in place, that really doesn't adequately or completely evaluate the employee's performance. To me, there are so many other factors that need to be considered. Especially, we need to ask, is the employee being efficient? Are they meeting the customer's needs? And most importantly, at least in the claims environment, are they moving the claim toward conclusion? In the insurance industry, a closed claim is a happy claim. When we talk about interpersonally oriented behaviors, it's really having conversations with teammates regarding job related tasks or just basic conversation. Good morning. How was your weekend? What's going on with you? How's the family? Um, I know personally when it comes to performance assessment, a lot of employees struggle with this particular area. Recently, I was in a recent onboarding class just a couple of weeks ago, and I had an employee. It was on the third day, who was a new trainee, and he said to me, "All I want to do, Laura, is I just want to come to work, and I just want to sit there." Answer the phone, talk to the customer, do my task, and go home. I don't want to do anything else. And that really bothered me. And I said, why do you just want to do that? I just want to do that because that's what I'm getting paid to do. I don't want to talk to anyone. I don't want to hear about anyone else's business. And I don't want anyone to hear about me. So it really took me aback a little bit. And I kind of just took the time to share with him that, you know what? It's more than just sitting down, taking phone calls, and working tasks. It's about sharing leading practices with your peers. It's about building those relationships with your peers. Your team manager really wants to see if you're a team player and if you can get along and work with others. That way they can make you work on projects and do things, and it develops you and it makes you into a better individual. So you can go ahead and move along within the company and move up. And then who knows, one day you could be put in a position of being a supervisor and you'll be able to have the same conversation with someone who thought just like you. Um, I guess the next thing would be downtime behaviors. Behaviors really outside of the work environment that really impact job performance, whether that be someone working an additional job, excessively consuming alcoholic beverages, or even taking drugs for that fact. In today's society, it's not uncommon for people actually to work a second or even third job, and they come to work tired and exhausted, and they're not able to give that full effort, that full 100%. And, unfortunately, we run across those employees that, due to personal issues or work related stressors, that they drink excessively. And they come to work with hangovers and they come to work not remembering things and slurring their words and not being able to articulate what they need to when the time comes to talk to on the phone with our customers. And then, even worse, I know at my job, we've even had employees that'll come to work that are high off of marijuana, attempting to talk to customers and handle claims. And the reason that they're on it, they're trying to cope with their own personal demons. And it's just unfortunate that we have people that are put into these situations and they just need people to talk to kind of help them. And they need those resources and people to reach out to them to let them know that they're not alone and they don't have to do this at all. The last piece, destructive hazardous behaviors. To me, that right there deals with personal discipline. I know the book had given an example of an employee not using the proper or necessary safety equipment, like when operating a machine. I think a little bit more outside the box. When I think of destructive or hazardous behaviors in regards to business, um, I know I consider what I'm in employees not using their various resources when they're handling claims. And to me, this type of behavior, it demonstrates an individual's lack of effort to do what is right and, most importantly, what is best for the customer. It shows a lack of discipline to a person who does not follow the rules or the guidelines. And what's interesting is I know the book had mentioned about Murphy's List is really broad compared to Campbell's, making it very difficult to assess the differences between employees. But the nice thing is, and here's the positive piece, is that it does provide a set of guidelines to use to compare and to contrast employees' job performance. And finally, the last question. What are some possible common organizational constraints? How could they lead to counterproductive behaviors? This one I thought was quite interesting as well. When we talk about organizational constraints, I think of, which is a big, huge thing where I work, lack of absence control policies. Fortunately, we do have a attendance policy in force at my job. And most companies have to deal with their employees calling into work due to they're sick, their kids are sick, or just personal issues of that. Really depending upon an employee's work ethic will depend on the amount of time that they're absent from work. Really, in an organization, not having an appropriate attendance policy in place can really cause an organizational constraint, leading to these counterproductive behaviors. I know for my job, claim associates are required really to adhere to an attendance policy, and we have a certain number of points that are assessed according to whether they are absent a full day, they're late, they leave a few hours early, or they're late from returning to lunch. Once an employee reaches a maximum of 20 points, then the team manager will submit what's called a request for termination. So it's really strict. It is what it is, and that's just what they do. The next thing that I thought was interesting, that I thought was an organizational constraint, was abuse of supervision. To me, in my opinion, this would be one of the worst organizational constraints. It really involves a supervisor being demeaning or condescending to a particular employee or employees. Sometimes it can involve a manager being overcritical or even taking credit for an employee's work. I know years before I became a team manager, I recall a supervisor that I had that was who really had a reputation of being rude, and she just was non-supportive and was very judgmental. I was new to her team. I was still learning the role, and she just was rude. She was rude to me in front of the team. She would make fun of me or talk down to me, saying, "You don't know how to do this. You should. This is your job. You need to learn it ASAP." And it really did make me feel almost inadequate. But then I had to remind myself, "Oh no, I'm not going to allow you to do this to me." But what was really interesting is the same woman, the same supervisor, when her boss would give her a project that needed to be completed or come up with some sort of idea, she always came to me and she would ask me for my ideas. Hey, Laura, I'm going to give this to you to help you. That's how she would sell it to me. I'm going to help you. So if you can go ahead and lay out your ideas, create this presentation, or just whatever it was. And every time I turned it in, she loved it. But when it came down to her boss recognizing her for her efforts and how great that they thought the project or presentation was or the idea, she never gave the credit that I deserve for it. And that was unfortunate. And it really just made me not respect her as a supervisor or even as a person. Fortunately, I should say, needless to say, she didn't last long for the company, and she was given an ultimatum to go ahead and quit, or she was going to be permitted to retire because she had worked there for so long. So she went ahead and took the latter and just retired so she could go ahead and get her benefits. But what her behavior taught me was not to do what not to do when I became a supervisor years later. The very last piece is the social undermining. And this really involves keeping others in the workplace from developing positive relationships or just really preventing employees from just being successful in the work environment. Um, Social undermining is very similar to the abusive supervision. Unfortunately, in our work environment, there are too many activities or too many, I'm sorry, opportunities for supervisors or peers to really demonstrate this behavior towards an individual. Although I work with a good leadership team, there are the occasional supervisors that don't have employees' best interest at stake. Unfortunately, I've known supervisors that have a personality conflict with their employees, and they hold that against them, and they will not help develop them. They will not allow them to participate in certain activities or promotional opportunities just to help that particular employee, just to allow them to develop a certain skill set. And it's really interesting because during these leadership meetings, these same supervisors they talk poorly about the employees, sharing their experiences, attempting to influence the thoughts of their peers. And what's interesting is they didn't really realize is that the majority of the time they're making themselves look bad, and it really just shows their insecurities. So that is the end of my midterm oral exam. Thank you.